You could teach somebody the mechanics, make them a good technician, but that's not really, in my mind, what fellowship is about. So my job, I feel, is to try to help unlock the potential inside that person.
Welcome to Season 6 of EyeCan, a podcast about ophthalmology through a uniquely Canadian lens. EyeCan is co-hosted by me, Hady Saheb, and Heather O'Donnell. Throughout the season, we'll have guest co-hosts for some of our shows. We will share our experiences as ophthalmologists today and tackle some of the challenges we face as healthcare providers. Season 6 of EyeCan is brought to you by Devesh Varma Canada and Johnson & Johnson Vision. We thank them for their support. On this episode of EyeCan, we welcome Dr. Devesh Varma, Medical Director of Prism Eye Institute and Executive Vice President at Vision Group. He is a glaucoma and complex anterior segment surgeon at Trillium Health Partners and an assistant professor at the University of Toronto. Dr. Varma is an engineer by training and completed his fellowship in glaucoma and advanced anterior segment surgery at the University of Toronto, where he is currently a fellowship mentor and has treated over 150,000 patients, performing more than 18,000 surgeries. He is also the founder of the Emerging Leaders Program for Ophthalmologists at the Rotman School of Management. Devesh is impressive in many ways, and one of the aspects of his career that I've admired is the different dimensions in which he has excelled. From clinical and surgical excellence to building impressive clinical and surgical facilities across the country, and more recently, writing a book on the role of bias in our lives, Blind Spots. Devesh and I became good friends through residency and fellowship and have remained close through professional collaboration, travel, our families getting to know each other. So today's conversation has a very personal flavor for me. So thank you, Devesh, for inspiring many of your friends and colleagues over the years and for being with us here on EyeCan today.
Thank you, Hady. It's a very flattering bio. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you to the COS for putting this together.
So the first question I wanted to ask you is about leadership and what that means to you. So you clearly have played the role of a leader through the many programs you've built, your roles at Prism Eye Institute and Vision Group, among many other leadership roles. And so I've been wondering if these responsibilities have occurred organically over time for you, or if you've been intentional about the various roles you have taken on. So tell me more about your vision for leadership and how this has affected your choices and opportunities regarding these leadership roles.
Well, first of all, it's unusual to have the chance to sort of reflect back. And I've never really thought of my journey as a leadership journey. I think at the end of the day, I've been very fortunate to have had great mentors who brought out some of the best in me and who helped me identify areas of need. And so I think to answer your question, it's, most of my journey has been pretty organic. I don't think I could say I plotted it all out. If I came to a place, my goal was to try to leave it better than what it was when I arrived. And many of the places that I came to really inspired me to try to make change, to make life better for patients, for colleagues, for staff, for that community. And then in order to do that, I had to develop skills and relationships. And I think that's probably the crux of it all is coming with a genuine desire to serve and a genuine curiosity that leads you to build the skills to do it. So yeah, I'd say it's been very organic.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, I'm kind of hearing a few themes, and one seems to be impact, and two, also responding to a need. I think those are themes that are common to many, but I think what you've done with them is kind of what's impressive, right? So I think many people want to have an impact and respond to needs, but your ability to take those themes and convert them into building great things is, I think, what one of the impressive things about your journey. So as you think about that leadership journey, is it the same in clinic? Like when you're in clinic every day, do those themes apply, or do you feel like your role as a leader in clinic when you're kind of patient facing is any different than what you've just discussed?
That's another great question. I think for me, the foundation And I think it is for many of us. The foundation is medicine. I mean, we all go into this field uh, to make a difference at a patient level. I think that's where we all start. And I think many of us strive to be the very best doctor we can be. I chased that to the extent that I could. I trained with phenomenal people. I wanted to make sure that I first perfected my craft the best that I could, so that I could really make the difference with each patient. So I think it starts from there, and to this day, that's a very different hat. And I think I enjoy it probably most of all. I think there's days that are tough for all of us, but I think if I really look back, the one thing that I would never ever give up is patient care, no matter how exciting or interesting or busy things got with leadership roles. I think patient care is probably the root of a lot of my joy. Do some of the skills come in handy? Sure. I mean, you learn to communicate well. You learn to think through problems, with the experience that you get in leadership roles. But I think ultimately the physician hat is a special one that I kind of hold a little bit separately.
Totally hear you on that one. I love that. So when we initially met, we were both trainees, and then I got to spend a little bit more time with you when I was a fellow in Toronto. And at that stage, you took a clinic that was doing great work, and you were trying to improve the processes. And then you went from doing that to building a new clinic and building an OR, and then multi-site clinics regionally. And now you're, at a national level, building clinics across the country. And so are there clear kind of learning points that you take from this experience over the years? What can you share with us about what you've learned building larger scale clinics and ORs across the country through Prism and Vision Group?
Yeah, I mean, that's been an amazing journey. I came to Prism as a fellow, just as you did, and I was really impressed. When I got there, I thought, there's something special here. These people are doing something beyond just a regular doctor's office. I felt like they were just amazing players in the eye care ecosystem, whether that was through research that was often self-funded, whether that was through teaching, whether it was through giving back to the community, taking on difficult cases, complex cases, as well as routine ones, and trying to do it at a level that I thought was very exemplary, ethical. Everything about it really struck me. And so I thought, well, the best way for this level of care to reach more people is for us to grow it and scale it. I was fortunate enough that my partners brought me in and said, yeah, that we like your vision, but what if this is a money-losing clinic and you scale it and then we just all lose a whole lot of money? So, which was a legitimate question because we didn't know if that was the case or not. So they said, why don't you first make sure that we're at least breaking even and then we scale it? So I had to learn a little bit about the business side, making sure that we were scaling in a way that was sustainable and responsible from a business standpoint, from a patient standpoint. And so that was kind of the start of it. I think, what did I learn? I think I learned that if you have a purpose larger than yourself, and in this case, it was trying to reach more patients with that care philosophy, you will find people who will want to get onto that train with you. And then the challenge for me was, well, how do we get, now we have over 180 team members, plus the doctors, so another 40 doctors on top of that. So 220 people rowing in the same direction. And I think that really requires a very clear vision, where you're going and who you are. And then you sort of collect people along the way that believe in that. So that was probably the start point. The next step is, how do you get all those people to coordinate? And for that, beyond the vision, you need to have systems that people can follow. If you make things very complex, it's very difficult for people to execute. But if you try to distill it down to the real core, this is what's really adding value here, and make it as simple as possible, then more people can participate and you can bring along a team. And, in my experience, if you want to go fast, you can go alone. But if you want to go far, you have to go together. You have to go with people. And that's, I think, the real strength at Prism is we've got a really great team, and we have a group that works well so that we can go very far together.
I want to double click on some of the things you said. So is there anything that you wish people that are working in a larger clinic would know? So if you're thinking of like an ophthalmologist that's not necessarily in your shoes, making those decisions behind the scenes to keep the business going, somebody who's, showing up to the clinic or one of the ORs that are working, seeing patients, is there anything that you wish that ophthalmologists, whether it's at your clinic or other clinics where similar decisions are being made and similar processes are placed, is there anything you wish they knew that would help them better understand what's going on and make their experience and their patient's experience better?
Yeah. I mean, I think generally I've been very blessed. The team members that I work with are fantastic. And everybody believes in what they're doing. Everybody wants the best for their patients. And I think that helps. So certainly when we start with our hearts in the right place, generally speaking, we'll get to a good outcome. I think most doctors are passionate, not just about their work, but about the importance of their contribution. So I think they're passionate about their individual practices just as they are about the mission. I think most doctors are very, very intelligent people and maybe used to being one of the smartest people in the room in a lot of situations. And so sometimes when something comes up that may not go quite as planned, they will have a thought about it, and it's probably a very intelligent thought, and they'll have some very strong feelings about it. And I think it's very easy sometimes for people to think, oh, well, I'm being mistreated here, or something, I'm being ignored, or there's something really amiss here. And, or maybe they feel, well, this has become a larger group. It's more corporate. It's not personal. It's not me. And so I guess in that situation, what I hope for is that, we have a bit of compassion from our team members to say, hey, you know what, first of all, there's nobody here who's evil or stupid. Everybody's trying to do the same thing. And second of all, this isn't a big corporation. This is just a few doctors who are trying to put together a home for others who are like-minded to work. And we're all very similar. And so I just hope for a little sympathy and understanding on those days that are frustrating, because we all have those. And I'd hope that they would just know that, look, we're all trying to do good here. We're all trying to do the same thing. And sometimes being part of a group means you can't have it exactly your way for everything. For many things you can, but there are a few things you just have to do it the way the group does, because otherwise it can become a bit of a circus. So I guess a little bit of patience would be helpful on those days when we're frustrated. And for the most part, I have to say our doctors are very good for that.
Sounds like every clinic across the country needs to have a little meditation room for some deep breathing and some collective empathy. So I like that. I wanted to pivot a little bit to surgical innovation. So, to me, you've often been one of the first across the country to adopt new glaucoma technology. And I know for myself, I found that it can be really exciting to incorporate technology, but also challenging to integrate those two technologies into our clinical and surgical practices. So can you share with us your approach regarding integrating new technology? So, specifically thinking about patient discussion, staff education, post-operative care, and how it differs when you are considering integrating new technology compared to kind of doing traditional standard of care stuff that everybody else is doing at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been very privileged, Hady, to work in a period when glaucoma has been changing rapidly. Even from when we started in practice to now, the number of options that we have has really grown exponentially, and it allows us to really customize our treatment plans for an individual patient. That's been one of the best parts about the whole journey. And, while it's always a little disconcerting to try new things, when it's somebody's sight that you're dealing with, it's a big responsibility. At the same time, it's also one of the most exciting parts about being a glaucoma surgeon. And I wouldn't give it up. And I think most of us probably wouldn't. So how do we navigate that challenge? Well, I think, first of all, you have to believe in the intervention. So if it doesn't make sense to me, then I'm probably going to be a little bit reluctant to try it. So it has to make sense, and the science behind it has to be, fairly reasonable and rigorous. That I think for me, I want to know that the company that is bringing this product to market, or the research group has put some thought behind it and has applied some scientific rigor. I think that's very important. I think when I approach a new procedure, I've been very fortunate to have had excellent training. And I think I have a fairly good idea of what you can and can't do in an eye and what you can get away with. So I can approach things with a bit of confidence that way. But still, I try really hard to visualize all of the things that could go wrong and how I'll handle them. And then I typically will track my results for the first 6 to 12 months. So even if there's published data, I want to know what my data looks like. Because maybe I'm not getting the results others are because of my own failure and I need to modify things, or maybe I've found a way to adjust it, maybe get a little better result, which I might want to share. I think those are sort of that's the framework with which I'll approach new surgical options. How do I discuss it with patients? I'm pretty open with them. So if it's something new, I'll tell them, look, this is new. This is the number that I've done. This is the number that have been done. This is the evidence around it. Here's why I like it for you. It's helpful if it's a procedure that doesn't preclude future surgeries, so they have less to lose. Not all surgeries are like that, of course, but it does help. But I tend to be pretty transparent when discussing it with patients. I think most of them are there because they, on some level, trust us, whether that's because their referring doctor has told them to trust us or because they have a good interaction. And if they don't trust us, then it wouldn't matter what surgery I was pitching, probably would walk away. And that's totally the right. But I think because of that trust, I've found for the most part, patients are pretty willing to undergo something new. And many of them actually feel positive about it. Like they're getting an opportunity to have the latest and greatest, which often is exactly how it is.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm wondering if you've had any pushback over the years once you've mentioned that it was something new, because I'm thinking, about the many cases where I've proposed something new, whether it's a new lens or a new glaucoma device, and I can think of a few people that are like, oh, new? Then no, give me something that's been around for decades. But the overwhelming majority are, I feel, really guided by, our recommendation as their surgeons. So have you felt like you've gotten pushback just when you've introduced the concept of it being a newer device or a newer approach?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we all get pushback from time to time, and certainly there are people who feel very nervous. They'll say, well, can you do 20 or 30 and then get back to me? I've had that answer. Yeah, I suppose I understand that. At the same time, I don't know that everybody has the luxury of that time in the glaucoma world.
Yeah.
I've had people who'll say, well, what else do you have, doc? And I'll tell them, well, this is what else I have. And here's why I didn't recommend it first. Because the next question is always going to be, well, why didn't you just lead with that? So usually I'll tell them, well, here's why I recommended the other one. But, ultimately I'm going, if it's a reasonable choice to take an alternative surgery and it makes them more comfortable, I wouldn't want to push them into something just for fear that whatever comes up afterwards, they'll say, well, if you hadn't pushed me, doc, I wouldn't be in this situation. It might be completely unrelated, but for the patient, they might not know that.
For sure. Just today, I saw a patient who had kind of a newer glaucoma surgery in one eye, and then they had something more traditional 6 or 7 years ago in the other eye. And so they've had a wonderful postoperative journey in this, newer, more recent surgery. And today they wanted to have a whole chat about why we didn't do it in the other eye. And of course, the surgery wasn't available then. And so, but it was an interesting discussion, right? And so it's, I think it's part of the glaucoma surgeon's life. Things are changing so quickly that we're, often taking the same patient, and on their second eye, they're getting a different kind of surgery just because of what's become available in that lag between the two eyes. So
yeah, so true.
EyeCan wants to know what you think. Please send your comments on today's episode or any suggestions you may have for topics or features to communications@cos-sco.ca, and we'll try to incorporate them into future episodes.
EyeCan veut savoir ce que vous en pensez. Veuillez envoyer vos commentaires sur le balado d'aujourd'hui ou vos recommandations de sujets à communication@cos-sco.ca et nous essaierons de les intégrer dans les prochains épisodes.
Hi, I'm Vishal Bhamwani, and I listen to the EyeCan podcast.
So when, as we said before, we kind of met in fellowship residency days, and we both kind of have been wearing the fellowship mentor hat. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your journey as an educator. What have you felt are kind of the most important things to instill in residents and fellows training with you today? So what's kind of on your mind, other than the specifics of this is how you do this implant, or this is how you evaluate this glaucoma diagnostic? Like, what are the general traits that you're prioritizing to instill in your trainees?
I find, first of all, trainees and the whole experience of mentoring is one of the most rewarding parts of what we do. It takes more time, takes some effort. It certainly is a fair bit of responsibility, both from a patient care perspective if things don't go smoothly, and also you're responsible. Somebody's giving you a year of their life as a fellow, sometimes two. After they've graduated, they could have gone out and practiced. They could have done anything, but they've chosen to give up that time and spend it with you, right? And so it's a huge responsibility. And you're right. You could teach somebody the mechanics, make them a good technician, but that's not really, in my mind, what fellowship is about. So my job, I feel, is to try to help unlock the potential inside that person, help push them to their limits and find a new one. And in order to do that, I think the qualities they need are genuine curiosity, a certain amount of humility, the ability to face one's own errors honestly, and from that, once you can do that, you can learn to improve. Generally, I'll ask fellows questions to see if they're prepared. And if I don't see a level of depth in that preparation, they're not ready. So I expect a very, very high level of depth and visualization. I want to know every single step of the surgery you're going to do. I want to know exactly where you're going to place your incisions, how they're going to be shaped, why you're going to place them there. Everything down to that level of detail. And then if things don't go as planned, usually I'm going to ask them, why do you think that happened? And if I get a story like, well, patient moved, or it was a weird eye, it's unacceptable for me. Or if I ask a question, why did you do that? And the answer is, well, because that's how I was taught. Not an acceptable answer. So I'm looking for something much, much deeper, a deep sense of curiosity and a deep sense of personal responsibility. And from those, I think, come a learner's mindset. And if a person can bring that to the OR and to the clinic every day, well, then the sky's the limit and we can unlock their potential.
I like what you say. And I also know that there's some really great learners that think like that because that's the environment they grew up in, like, oh, I just do this because that's what my teacher showed me or whatever. So if you do encounter that, what's been your approach to try and inspire those learners to think about it differently and not just kind of take things for granted? So my guess is at some point you've had somebody that's come, working with you that does have those attitudes of, just blaming circumstances for the challenges they face in the OR, or just do as they've seen. So how have you converted that mindset to the mindset you're looking for, which is to challenge things, think about things in depth, take responsibility for anything that occurs in the OR? What has been your approach to help them through that journey?
That's not always been easy. I think you probably have had the same experience, I'm sure, as a fellowship preceptor. You can only push so hard on any given day, before somebody just says, well, that's it, I don't want to hear it from you anymore, right? So you kind of have to have a few days where I push, and then there's a few days where I'll sort of patch up a little bit, and encourage. And I've just found I wait for an opportunity. So if we have an OR day and they do 8 cases and 7 of them go really well, that's great. That's a good day for me to give some encouragement. But if that 8th case has challenges, that's the one that I want to spend a little time on. Like, why do we have that issue, right? Let's dig into that a little. And when we dig, I'm not thinking about, well, my hands were in the wrong position. I'm digging for, what was your thought process? What were you feeling when that happened? What went through your head when you made whatever that decision was. And I'll usually let them go a little bit because chances are, I can fix what they're doing, but I want them to dig a little bit of a hole if I think there's a gap there in their thinking or their approach, so that we can use that as a lever to open up a whole new topic for them to explore. And then I'll give them a day or two to think about it and come back and ask, how did that go when you went home and reflected on it? I think it works, but you'd have to ask my fellows, how that's been for them, to be honest. I'm not the only preceptor, so it could very well be that my approach isn't working, and Ike's or Matt Schlenker's or Irfan Kirani's or Gia Yu's approach is what's really doing the trick here. I don't know, but I can tell you the fellows do come through the year thinking differently than when they started.
Absolutely, I can assure you that I've heard that many of the fellows have grown a lot from your guidance. So absolutely, do take credit. You should, or at least that's what I'm hearing. So what I want to talk about next is something I'm very excited about, which is the book that I'm holding here in my hand, Blind Spots: How Biases Distort Our Decisions, that you wrote. And so I read that on my last family holiday in Morocco a few months ago, and I really liked it. It's a great description of the many biases that affect your decisions, and I love the way you approach it. Kind of every chapter, like a very structured approach about what the bias is, how this plays out in the business world, in medicine, and your personal life, and there's so many great anecdotes in there, and knowing you make reading those anecdotes that much better. And so definitely encourage all of our listeners to check out that book and read it. There's so much to learn there. When you wrote that book, I mean, I knew you had enough on your plate. So why did this happen? Why did you find the time to write this? And tell me more about what was the driving force to writing this book in an already busy and full life?
Well, it was a passion project. So I stayed up late a lot of nights, to be honest, to write this book. It was a topic that had fascinated me for years. To be honest, I've just made a whole lot of mistakes. And sometimes, with the best of intentions, I would make a major error. And then I would ask myself, like, what did I miss here? Like, how did this happen? And if you have enough of those, then you end up with 17 chapters in a book, basically. And together we were at the Emerging Leaders Program, and John Esch was one of our professors there, and he has a PhD in decision science, which really is all about bias. And so John and I really hit it off when he was the faculty lead and I was the ophthalmology side lead for that program. And I talked to him about the idea of having a podcast, actually, around these biases, and went to his farmhouse and we hashed out some notes, and I, done a bunch of research, and then COVID hit, and we actually just would have been a good time to do a podcast, but we never actually did. So we didn't end up doing the podcast. And here I had all these notes and thoughts from our conversation and from my pre-work. And then one day I went to dinner with one of our associates, Michelle Kahn, and she showed me a video of her singing. She's a really good singer. And she was producing an album, and I couldn't believe it. I thought, wow, like, what an amazing thing. And she said, well, do you have a passion project? And I said, well, yeah, I've always wanted to write a book. She said, well, what's stopping you? I don't know. I guess nothing. So I went home that night and started writing, pulled out the notes, and 6 months later, published a book. So I guess I have a lot of people to thank, but Michelle probably gave me the final inspiration to get up and get moving.
Wow. Does she know that she had that impact on you?
I think so. Well, there was one other person. This is going to sound crazy, but you remember when Mike Butler sent us that book?
Yeah.
and Nav had put it together and published it. I asked Nav, how'd you do it? And he said, I just self-published with Amazon. I thought, well, then in that case, I have no other barriers left. I don't have to get this past the publisher. I'm just going to do this, self-publish, and I'm not really writing it for an audience. I'm mostly just writing it to get my thoughts down. Something that maybe I can show my kids someday so they'll know what I was thinking about at this stage of my life. And that was that.
I love that. What a great story on how, something was just, sitting in your thoughts for for years, and then just one day you decided to do something about it, and that's amazing. I love that. Is there the 17 chapters, is there a chapter or a kind of bias that you're particularly excited about or you like talking about more than others? Can you think of a favorite?
There are a couple of favorites. I think confirmation bias is one of the biggest ones for us. And you and I, especially in the glaucoma world, really lived that as new technologies were coming out, and those who are passionate about them would select studies that supported that part of the practice, and those who were passionate against them would select studies that supported that view, and then they would go off to subspecialty day at the academy and have debates about it. But really, it was just a whole lot of confirmation bias, right? And so that one, I think, because we both lived it, that one rings very, very true. I think the loss aversion or the sunk cost type of fallacy, those are big ones in the surgical world, and the story around H. pylori and how it took 20 years for the medical community to really accept that gastric ulcers were a medical disease and not a surgical disease. I mean, that one really struck a chord for me. I think there's a few like that. There's the experience one really gets me with fellows around this stage of year. That bias really shows up. You've got sort of this idea that your experience is going to help you make good decisions, and it normally does, but not always. And just because you have experience doesn't mean that the situation in front of you is exactly what you've experienced before. And you can become very overconfident. Our fellows around 6 or 7 months hit a stage right now, this happening right now, when they feel like, oh, you know what, I got this. I know exactly what I'm doing. And sometimes that's when they're more dangerous, right? I was that person at that stage of my training. So those are a handful, but they're plenty. I'd say each of those biases has had a role in my life at some point.
And as you think about your experience writing this book, you've written a bunch of scientific articles over the years as well. How did writing this book compare, like the actual experience of like sitting and typing? How did it compare to the scientific writing you've done in the past?
That's a good question. So it was more fun. I can say, just because it was a topic I was very, very passionate about, and I love glaucoma, and I love the research around it, but I don't know that I had the same degree of passion for, statistical analysis of glaucoma data as I had for this. So this was easy for me to stay up and really dig into on one hand. On the other hand, it's not as structured. So, if you write a journal article, you kind of know all the sections and you know how it all fits together. This one was a bit more of a blank slate. So trying to get it all to be organized and fit into a story was a little tougher. And I think the sheer length, even though it's not a long book, I think it's just over 100 pages. It's a short book. But for me, it was the longest thing I'd ever written. And so just making sure, is this sentence going to sound like something from earlier in the book? How do I make sure that it's not it's not repetitive in any way, and everything kind of flows smoothly over the course of multiple chapters. That was a bit of a challenge for me, but a lot of fun.
Amazing. Well done, and we'll definitely have information about the book in the show notes for our listeners. So as we're wrapping up, I wanted to talk a little bit about legacy, and I'm wondering, looking ahead for you, what does meaningful leadership look like to you? So if you're going to look back in a few decades and look back at what the last few decades of your career have looked like, how are you hoping to measure your own success? So, if I just throw out things like surgical innovation, research output, number of blind spots booked, sold, number of mentees trained, number of clinics for ORs or patients seen, what do you think you'll be looking at in terms of how to measure your own success? What's your best guess?
First of all, it's impact for me. It's all about impact. And I think that starts at home. And I think for you, you're a family man as well. And so I think the impact for my wife and my kids is probably paramount. But if we're going to set the home part aside, like in terms of career, like it's still impact. I've been very lucky that I've had the chance to work alongside Ike Ahmed for goodness 17 years now, and it's pretty tough to find a more dynamic innovator than him. So I think for me, glaucoma innovation, I'd love to have an impact there, but I think he's having such a spectacular impact that I'm okay with my role being the integrator. So what can I do to take some of these incredible ideas and help integrate them into a practice situation that is applicable, that works for thousands of people. I don't need to have my name on that. I'm thrilled that Prism and now my role at Vision Group allowed me to grow systems that help a lot of patients and help a lot of doctors. And I hope that at the end of it all, I hope for a couple of things. One, that I've had a hand in building something that outlasts me, that moves on and lives on for the benefit of our community. And two, if I'm fortunate enough to find a few people that I can help transition it to so that they can then make it their own. My hope is that the next generation of doctors takes this and turns it into something even better that reflects their values and the future that they see. And if I can accomplish those two things, then I'll be very satisfied with my work.
Awesome. Amazing, Devesh. Our wrap up for the podcast is a lightning round. So just a few questions that are meant to be kind of short answer, just to get to know you a little bit more. And I'm going to theme this lightning round with a theme of hacks, because every time I speak to you, I feel like you've always got the best hacks. So I want to be selfless and share some of these hacks with our listeners. So I'll just ask you to share some of your favorite hacks, and I'll just tell you for which, or ask you to share hacks in different spheres of your life. So I'm wondering if you have a favorite travel hack.
Buy packable clothes. So packable underwear, packable sport coats, packable pants. Like you can buy things that are small, packable, they dry fast. And the whole goal is to get everything into a small carry-on, as small as possible.
Never check in luggage, hey? And do you do the same thing when you're traveling with a family? Are you able to get everybody into carry-on?
Yeah. You know what? Our family's pretty good at that. We're pretty slick. Although sometimes I'm the one with the carry-on, and there might be a checked bag with all the other stuff. But we're pretty good with carry-on. We've done, 2-3 week trips, carry-on only. So
fantastic.
It's doable.
Great.
Takes a little planning.
How about your favorite efficiency hack? And I'll ask you for something on the personal side and maybe something on the professional side. It could even be something clinical about clinic flow. So personal efficiency hack and professional/clinical efficiency hack.
So personal, I am a big fan of lean theory. So as efficient as possible. So never put something down more than once. So just put it in its spot. So if that's your dishes, you put your dish down in the dishwasher, not in the sink. And if that's, whatever your toothbrush, it goes back down in the holder, wherever that is. So that way you don't spend your time looking for stuff. That's it drives my wife bonkers. But that is sort of my personal efficiency hack. For work,
would she call it an obsession or a hack? What would she call it? She'd probably call it an obsession, right? For sure. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
For work, I do feel there's a lot of power in being able to delegate effectively. But what does that mean? It means if somebody can do something, or you can automate a task at 80% of your capability, then you should delegate it and use your time for something that only you can do.
Amazing. 2 more. One is a favorite fitness hack.
Oh,
fitness or health hack. Yeah.
So, well, it's changed over the years. Lately, I am a big fan of consistency over intensity. So for me, switching to 7-day-a-week workouts in the morning, consistently, actually unlocked a whole lot of potential, and including in that some endurance days, helped me build a foundation for the heavier weight days. So consistency over intensity, and as far as possible, daily if possible.
So tell me about the compromises on intensity that you accepted so that you're more consistent. Is it that you're doing it less or less duration, or you're just pushing yourself, being more gentle with how hard you're going? What are the compromises on intensity that you're accepting?
So I used to do short HIIT training workouts. They'd be 20, 30-minute workouts, and then I'd need a day to recover sometimes from those. Now I'll do a 35, 40-minute weight workout. It'll be circuits. It won't be, completely, Tabata style, so you're going to puke. It won't be necessarily that intense. So, my body will not need necessarily a full day to recover. And on my recovery day, I'll do an endurance workout. So something not too crazy, zone 2, zone 3 tops. And I'll do that a couple of times a week. And I found that being able to do that 7 days a week, including the recovery days versus, 3 days a week of intense circuit training, intense HIIT style training, seemed to be a little bit better in terms of injury prevention. And I actually got better fitness results if I looked at my metrics.
And on kind of in the same line, or the last one would be a nutrition hack.
Well, I've been on a pretty low carb diet for 13, 14 years now, and it's worked pretty well. But I think for me, I realized everybody's different. There's no, I don't think there's any one diet for everybody. So I think it's just finding what you can do, on a regular basis and sticking with that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think for each person, whether that's intermittent fasting for one person, or it's low carb for the next, or keto, or, whatever it is, I think the key is finding something that doesn't feel like work, that you can manage with your lifestyle.
Yeah. And consistency. I've often used the term of like aiming to be the most boring man on earth, and just with this goal of consistency when it comes to health. No, really, I think that's what I'm hearing from you, right? Consistency over intensity. I think we're on the same mission. That's great. You did not disappoint, Devesh, as expected. You're full of hacks and pearls, so I'm glad we could share some of those with our listeners. This has been fantastic, Devesh. I really enjoyed this, and thank you for just doing everything you're doing. It's inspiring, it's exciting, it's impactful, and I really enjoyed getting the chance to talk to you about your journey, and I'm sure our listeners would enjoy it a lot. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Hady. Thank you for the opportunity to share all this. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. We look forward to bringing you more engaging content over the coming months.
Merci de vous être joint à nous pour cet épisode. Nous avons hâte de vous proposer d'autres contenus captivants au cours des prochains mois.
EyeCan wants to know what you think. Please send your comments on today's episode or any suggestions you may have for topics or features to communications@cos-sco.ca, and we'll try to incorporate them into future episodes.
EyeCan veut savoir ce que vous en pensez. Veuillez envoyer vos commentaires sur le balado d'aujourd'hui ou vos recommandations de sujets à communication@cos-sco.ca et nous essaierons de les intégrer dans les prochains épisodes.
Thank you from the Canadian Ophthalmological Society.
Merci de la part de la Société canadienne d'Ophthalmologie. Our sponsors for Season 6 of EyeCan are Astellas Pharma Canada and Johnson & Johnson Vision. We thank them for their support.
EyeCan is available wherever you listen to your podcasts, and of course, through the COS Practice Resource Center.
EyeCan est disponible partout où vous écoutez vos balados et bien sûr au Centre de ressources pour la pratique de la SCO. Listening to EyeCan counts for unaccredited MOC credits. Listeners may claim 0.5 credits per hour under Section 2, which is individual learning as educational content review, and that can be done up to 30 credits per year.
EyeCan is written and directed by Kim Tytler and produced by John Allaire from Allaire Strategic Works.
EyeCan est écrit et réalisé par Kim Tytler et produit par John Allaire Dallaire Strategic Works. Some episodes this season will include relevant links and show notes, so be sure to check episode descriptions to learn more. Certains épisodes de cette saison incluront des liens pertinents dans les notes d'émission, alors n'oubliez pas de consulter les descriptions des épisodes pour en savoir plus.
If any of our listeners have topic ideas to submit, please email them to communications@cos-sco.ca, and we will review for consideration.